I like birthdays. I like your birthday. I like everybody's birthdays. And of course, I like mine. And that's what leads me to telling you this story. I decided one year to plan my own birthday. Not a task that would be too hard, but something special just because I wanted to. So after work, week before my birthday, on my way home, I went down to the west side of the town where I live, where they have this great bakery. I parked the car, and I went in, and the glass is sparkly, and the chrome is shiny, and the cookies are rolled up or lined up like soldiers. There's cakes, there's aromas that put the smelling salts out of business. And the lady said to me, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "I'd like to order a cake for next week, September 11th. She said, "Sure, no problem. What kind do you want?" And I said, "Well, chocolate with chocolate mocha icing." "Okay, all right, no problem. Your name?" So I told her my name was Mary, and I'd be in next Wednesday to pick it up. "No problem, we'll see you then." So I left and patting myself on the back on the way home, and I thought, that cake's gonna be really good. And a week went by, and I took the day off from work. I put my kids on the bus, I got in the car, I drove down to the west side. I went in the wonderful Aroma Bakery, where the cookies are lined like soldiers and the cakes stand at attention, and the glass is shiny and the chrome is shiny, and it's just wonderful. And the lady said, it was a different lady this time, and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I have a cake here to pick up for Mary." And she says, "Oh, sure, no problem." And she went over to the case, and she bent over, and I heard the door slide open because I couldn't see her anymore. And I heard the slide of the cake, and she brought it out and stood up, but her back was turned to me. And she turned around and she put it on the counter. And I was just like, oh, I can't wait. This cake is gonna be so good. So she pulled one of those floppy boxes off of the shelf and she put it together. She slid my cake into the box. And then she reached up to the thingamajig on the wall that held the string, and she pulled the string and it went zzz, and it came down, and she went to wrap the cake up in the box, and she stopped. And she turned around, she looked at me, and she said, "Would you like to see the cake before I wrap it up?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be cool." So she carefully picked up the box and pirouetted towards me and tipped it ever so slightly. And I stood on my tiptoes and I looked over the counter, and the cake was beautiful. It was chocolate through and through, I knew. And the writing was in white icing. And this is about where my mind stopped for a minute, because I read the cake and it said, "Happy birthday, Marge." And I was like, this is gonna make a good story, and my family's gonna laugh, and we're gonna have a good time. And I just can't ruin her day and ask her to fix the G and the E. So I said, "It's beautiful." And she turned around, and she wrapped it in the string, and I paid for it. And I went out to the car, and I gently put it in the back seat. And driving home, I laughed almost all the way. And I thought, I'm never gonna live this down. And sure enough, I got home, waited for everybody to get home from work, from school, some family members to come over, and time for cake. And I put the cake in the middle of the table, and everybody looked at it and they said, "Who's Marge?" And I said, "For tonight, me." And they said, "Seriously?" And I said, "Yeah, I know, I can't even do this right." And they laughed, and I laughed. It was one of the greatest birthdays. But one of the things that came from this was the following year, all the cards I got for my birthday were addressed to Marge. So lesson learned, don't plan your own party.